Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moffin coming at you with another APUSH video. This time we're taking a look at topic 9.3, the end, yes, the end of the Cold War. Now, of course, when we talk about the Cold War, that long-term rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, this is going back quite a way and defining, several American presidential administrations, starting with Harry Truman. But by the time we get to the end of the 1980s, early 1990s, this long-time rivalry that will be really kind of putting America and really the world on edge out of fear of nuclear war will finally come to a conclusion. Now, when we were last here, we were talking about the Cold War going through certainly an evolutionary period in the 1970s. We talked about Nixon initiating détente, where we saw an easing of tensions out of a sense of pragmatism, continued by Ford. And then we start to see the détente kind of begin to erode under Carter with, Carter's fixation on, calling out the Soviet Union's lack of human rights protections, the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan, and of course that we retaliate with the boycotting of the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. So, so it's kind of eroding, but still though, there wasn't this sense by 1980 that we were on the verge of nuclear war like we had been a generation earlier, but that's going to change, and it's going to change pretty quickly with the election of Ronald Reagan. Now, in 1980, Ronald Reagan is going to just wipe the floor with Jimmy Carter. He's going to capitalize on, really in America that was down in the doldrums at the time. High inflation, high interest rates, high unemployment. We had been seen as, weak, relatively speaking. We lost in the Vietnam War. The Iran hostage crisis was still going on. And of course, there was the scandals associated with Watergate and the sense of incompetence of the last few administrations. So Reagan comes into power at a time where America had kind of seemingly lost its way and lost its mojo. And part of Reagan's platform was not just a sense of restoring national pride and restoring the economy and kind of reasserting, a lot of conservative cultural values. But it was also, reigniting the rivalry in a very real way with the Soviet Union. Now, don't take the 1970s, don't take détente to mean that, things were good, that we were buddies with the communists. Certainly far from it. But it seemed like there was a sense of we were willing to accept the reality that communism was here to stay, and let's just make the most of it given that reality. But under Reagan, that's going to be different. Under Reagan, he is going to be very, very clear in how he feels about communism. He will describe the Soviet Union as the quote-unquote evil empire. And that kind of sets a tone saying that not only is communism something that's different than the values we have here in America, it's saying that the values of the Soviet Union and communism are wrong. They are immoral. They are unjustified. This lack of democracy, lack of economic freedom, an atheistic society, all of those things, Reagan's going to consider an anathema to what life is supposed to be. And so in Reagan's mind, there is no call for a détente. There's no call for cooperation with the Soviet Union. There is the ultimate defeat of communism. It's not enduring kind of this stalemate in the Cold War, but ultimately winning the Cold War. So, Reagan is going to be immediately changing the course of this. And, he's basically of the mindset, we're here to win, we're here to stop communism. And it is going to rattle some folks because once again, it will reignite a sense of, oh my gosh, we might be headed towards a nuclear war once again. And, there's a lot of evidence to back this up. For example, Reagan's commitment to massively increasing the size of the U.S. military. In Reagan's first 4 years in office, we're going to see an 80% increase in the defense budget. Now, no, we are not at war. But it is sending a message that it looks like we're preparing for a war, that we are ready for a war if need be. And another part of this is tremendous amounts of investment in scientific research to try to have an edge on the Soviet Union. In many respects, this is harkening back, to 1950s, 1960s arms race, space race kind of stuff. In this case, in the form of what Reagan will describe as the Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI. What was SDI? SDI was a plan to basically place what would be satellites in space with lasers that would be able, in the event of a nuclear attack by the Soviets, to basically blast those nuclear missiles out of the sky before they had a chance to detonate on any American or NATO allied target. Now, this sounds pretty wild. It sounds like something out of a Star Wars movie. And of course, it doesn't help that Reagan, being the former actor, is going to be kind of lumped into this as well. It's almost as if, it sounds like somebody from the movie industry coming up with a strategic defense plan. So it's going to be panned by critics as outlandish and naive and a waste of resources and time with the dubbing of Star Wars. But even though SDI never gets put into implementation, it's sending a very clear message to the Soviet Union that when wrapped up with all of this additional expanded military spending, Reagan is putting pressure on the Soviet Union, basically telling the Soviets, we are prepared to spend whatever it takes to beat you in the Cold War. Now, this is done on purpose, and it's not just out of a sense of, hey, we just want to show that we're the biggest, baddest military on Earth. This is done with the understanding of how the Soviets would likely respond. As we've seen at other periods of the Cold War, the Soviet Union cannot abide just being kind of left in the dust militarily and technologically behind the United States. So if the United States is massively expanding its investment in the military and technology, well, then that means the Soviets are going to have to as well. And that's exactly what we wanted to see happen. Now, you might think, why would we want to see that happen? Well, here's the thing. Experts in the Reagan administration, especially economic experts, are going to be of the mindset that, after, 60 odd years of communism in the Soviet Union, that having that kind of economy had kind of rotted itself out from the inside, and that the economy was very fragile, very unstable, and that if it just was given a push, that the whole thing could collapse. And the idea being is that push would be American military spending and putting that pressure on the Soviet economy to try to keep up, and when that pressure is applied, it would then collapse the communist economic system, and if the economic system collapses, then the political system would collapse. So this is kind of this, in essence, master plan of the Reagan administration. And as we'll see, it does certainly play a major role. Now, in addition to just general military spending for the United States, Reagan is also going to be kind of bringing back some sense of the containment policy, the idea of stopping the spread of communism globally. And we'll see this take place a lot in Central America. We're going to see the United States show a willingness to try to thwart any attempts by communist groups to try to take over places in Latin America. Now remember, Cuba had long since already fallen to communism, so we didn't want additional examples like that. One example would be the invasion of Grenada in 1983. Now, many of you probably have no idea where Grenada is, but if you look at this map here of the world and you can see where my cursor is, Grenada is a teeny tiny island just off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean. And it was starting to kind of have a leftist-leaning government there, and we basically go in and just knock it off. It gets done in a matter of hours, literally, to basically topple that government and replace it with a more American-friendly government. Now, note, okay, this is a pretty bold thing to do, and those that are in Congress that are worried about, is Reagan poking the bear in terms of, kind of putting us in a situation where the Soviets might have to respond militarily to our actions of trying to thwart the spread of communism, there was a concern, of what could be going on. And no, Grenada is not the only place where there is a possibility of communism expanding. Another example would be in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is in Central America. Once again, if you look at my cursor over here, you can see this green-colored country over here, Nicaragua. And Nicaragua had been a dictatorship for many, many decades, generally friendly to the United States, but we had now seen an attempt by leftists to take over the government there. The Ortega regime in Nicaragua had now taken power. Well, as we had done in other places around the globe, we were interested in seeing anti-communist rebels trying to take back control. Now, once again, when you put this in the bigger framework of concerns about whether or not the United States, is taking steps that might, lead to an explosion in, a real war situation with the Soviets, we will see something called the Boland Amendment passed in Congress, which is going to ban aid to the Contras. Now, who were the Contras? Well, these guys are the Contras. The Contras were an anti-communist revolutionary group in Nicaragua, and the thought was that if they were properly resourced, they would be able to topple the Ortega regime and be able to, be withstanding an embrace of communism. Now, that being said, this sense that we're going to be seeing Congress kind of putting a limit and some boundaries on how far the Reagan administration can go, well, this is going to be kind of blowing up in the face of the Reagan administration, as we kind of move forward here. And that's going to lead to what is going to be the biggest scandal of the Reagan administration, and that's the Iran-Contra affair. This is going to be connecting three separate issues under the same roof. Basically, here's a map of some areas of interest as we get into this scandal. All right, we've already talked about Nicaragua with the Contras seeking to try to, kick out the communists. We also have over here in the Middle East, where my cursor is, Lebanon. Now, in the recent years, we'd seen about a dozen or so Americans that have been held hostage by Islamic extremists there. This was a group called Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah have been holding these Americans, some for several years now, and that's a concern. We want these American hostages out. Now, note, these are totally different hostages from the ones that were in Iran during the Carter administration. And in fact, don't forget that those American hostages in Iran were released on the very first day of Reagan's term in office, on Inauguration Day. So those hostages are long gone, but these are different hostages, a much smaller group in Lebanon. And then, of course, there is Iran, who we do have quite a bit of a history with. We do have the recent Iran hostage crisis, and Iran at this time is at war with their neighbor Iraq. Iraq led by this time by Saddam Hussein. Now, how do these three things kind of get tied together? Well, here's the deal. Iran, in its war with Iraq, initially is kind of getting its backsides kicked. So it's trying to get the upper hand. And to be able to get the upper hand, it needs weapons. The United States is, and note, this entire thing that is being proposed is going to be completely and totally illegal. Totally illegal. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's why this is secret. This is not something that is debated in Congress and, the American public knows about in the planning stages. This is all totally secret and illegal with folks working deep inside the Reagan administration. So what's the plan? Well, the plan is, let's sell Iran weapons. Once again, Iran is our enemy, but the idea is we can sell weapons to Iran, but what do we get out of helping Iran? Well, here's the thing. Iran has tremendous influence over those terrorists in Lebanon, Hezbollah, that are holding American hostages. So the idea is, if we sell weapons to the Iranian government to help them in their war against Iraq, then we will see Iran in return get those American hostages released in Lebanon. Sounds great. So how do the Contras get involved? Well, here's the problem, okay? If we sell a bunch of these weapons to Iran, then there's going to be a question of, well, where did all this money come from? You know what I mean? So then you have to secretly funnel the money somewhere else where it won't be caught. And where could you funnel money secretly that nobody is expecting and could certainly serve another purpose? That would be Nicaragua with the Contras. So the idea is you take those arms sales from Iran and give them to the Contras, even though it's totally illegal to do so, but this is an illegal deal anyway. All right, we will talk about the fallout from this plan Next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.